In October 2025, we lost D'Angelo. He was 51, and almost every tribute reached for the same few words. Genius, recluse, that voice. Forget all of that for a second. Go back 25 years. It is January 2000, and there is a video on MTV that nobody can stop talking about. One shot, one man, singing straight into the camera like it is the only other person in the room. Overnight, he is the most looked at man in music. In all the noise about how he looks, almost everybody misses the actual record. The one he spent 5 years building in the dark. The one that quietly rewired how a whole generation would play. This is the story of Voodoo. January 25th, 2000. Virgin Records puts out an album called Voodoo. 13 tracks, almost 79 minutes. No skits, no filler, no obvious single. It was made a few blocks from Washington Square, inside Electric Lady. The studio Jimi Hendrix built. And here is the first strange thing about it. In the year of Pro Tools, when everyone else was going digital, D'Angelo and his engineer Russell Elevato put almost the entire thing to 2-inch analog tape. Live, a band in a room. About 85% of what you hear is people playing together at the same time. No copying, no pasting, no fixing the timing on a grid. In 2000, that was not nostalgia, that was a dare. So what does Voodoo actually sound like? It sounds like it is leaning back, like the whole band is half a second late and completely sure of itself. That feel was the entire point. The drummer is Questlove, from The Roots, and his instruction to himself on these sessions was almost insane. Be sloppy, drag behind the beat, trust that it locks. Most records chase a perfect clock. Voodoo runs from it. The drums sit late, the bass leans, the keys hang back, and the little imperfections are not mistakes. They are the music. A lot of this came from listening to Jay Dilla, the producer out of Detroit, whose beats proved that slightly wrong could feel more human than perfectly right. Dilla never produced a track on Voodoo, but you can feel him in every pocket on it. They even kept the accidents. Its most famous song just stops in the middle of a word when the tape ran out, the story goes, and nobody had the heart to do it again. Read that twice. The most meticulous soul record of its era is built almost entirely out of feel. To understand why he ran from perfect, you have to go back to where he started. 1995. D'Angelo is 21 years old, out of Richmond, Virginia. His first album is Brown Sugar. He writes most of it alone in his bedroom, plays most of the instruments himself, and models the whole thing on one hero, Prince, the kid who read every album credit and decided he wanted to do all of it himself. Brown Sugar is gorgeous. Warm roads, smooth grooves, that voice stacked into a choir. It goes platinum, and critics call it the start of something. A label executive named Kedar Massenberg even gives that something a name, Neo Soul. But D'Angelo is not satisfied. He thinks Brown Sugar came out too clean, too, in his own word, buttery. So for the follow-up, he goes the other way completely. He moves into Electric Lady and disappears into the deep end of his record collection. Prince, Sly Stone, Hendrix, Al Green, Marvin Gaye, the grainy, dark, druggy funk of the early 1970s. He is not trying to make a sequel. He is trying to make a lost tape from 1972 that somehow turns up in the year 2000. This time, he does not do it alone. Electric Lady turns into a clubhouse. Musicians wander in, pick up instruments, and build songs across long overnight sessions. The press will later call this loose collective the Soulquarians. Look at who is in the room for Voodoo. Questlove on drums, Pino Palladino, one of the great bass players alive, anchoring the bottom, Roy Hargrove, a serious jazz trumpeter, writing and playing the horns, James Poyser on keys, Raphael Sadiq, who writes and produces the one song that will change D'Angelo's life, and behind the board, Russell Elevato, chasing that dark, smoky analog sound onto tape. Here is the thing people miss. Voodoo sounds loose, almost careless. It is the exact opposite. It is a room full of the most disciplined players of their generation, all agreeing to lean back at precisely the same time. That only sounds easy. Voodoo is almost entirely D'Angelo, but it has a few visitors. On left and right, he brings in Method Man and Redman, two of the funniest, hardest voices in 90s rap, and lets Q-Tip lay down the little vocal clicks underneath. Devil's Pie, the darkest thing here, was produced by DJ Premier, and it had already lived a whole life on the soundtrack to the film Belly, back in 1998. He covers Roberta Flack's Feel Like Making Love, and on a song called Africa, the drums are lifted straight off Prince from Parade. Little doors all over the record, opening onto soul, jazz, hip-hop, and funk at the same time. Now picture what music actually sounds like in January 2000. Turn on the radio, and it is the future, on purpose. TRL is the center of the universe. Britney, the Backstreet Boys, NSYNC. R&B is glossy and digital and tight as a drum machine, mostly because it is one. Destiny's Child are about to take over the planet with Say My Name. Everything is bright, clean, and snapped to a grid. And into that, D'Angelo drops 79 minutes of dark, warm, hand-played funk that sounds like it was dug out of somebody's basement. He is not alone in the soul lane. Lauryn Hill had just swept the Grammys with Miseducation. Erykah Badu and Maxwell are real stars. And in that exact same window, in that exact same building, the Soulquarians are finishing Erykah's Mama's Gun and Common's Like Water for Chocolate. Out in the wider world, the Y2K scare had just fizzled into nothing. AOL was buying Time Warner for around $162 billion. The internet felt invincible. And the most forward-looking record of the moment was the one staring 30 years into the past. Voodoo works. It debuts at #1, sells around 320,000 copies in its first week, and wins the Grammy for Best R&B Album. And right at the center of it is the song that needed no title. D'Angelo was a private person who only really opened up inside the music. On Untitled, How Does It Feel, he opens up all the way. He never has to name it. You listen for a few seconds and you know exactly what he is reaching for. And the magic of it is how much room he leaves you. The bass leans back, his voice keeps aching towards something, and somewhere in there you stop hearing his story and start drifting into your own. And then it just stops, mid-word, no fade, no soft landing. That was intentional too. Real feelings do not fade to black. When you are up that high, you rarely get a gentle way down. Sometimes you are simply left hanging. So that is exactly where he leaves you. And the video for it is just as exposed as the song. D'Angelo, alone in the frame, singing that one question straight into the camera. How does it feel? No set, no story, nowhere to hide. The same vulnerability as the record, looking right back at you. Most of the world does not take it that way. It runs constantly on MTV and BET. And almost overnight, he is less a musician than a phenomenon. The openness he offered comes back to him as a kind of attention he never wanted. And slowly, quietly, he starts to step back from all of it. Here is what Voodoo actually set off. That feel, the late human behind the beat pocket, did not stay on one record. It became a language. The same players carried it straight into Erykah Badu's Mama's Gun and Common's Like Water for Chocolate, both in 2000, and Bilal's debut the year after. The Soulquarians never put out a single album under that name. They just quietly reset the bar for what live soul could feel like. Musicians started calling it by a shorthand, the Dilla pocket, the Voodoo pocket, playing drums and bass a hair behind the click, on purpose, in a way you can still hear today in Anderson .Paak, in the internet, in a whole wing of modern R&B that grew up on this album. And it reaches backward too. The loose, jazz-schooled, sample-minded sound of crews like A Tribe Called Quest. The world we just spent a whole episode inside runs right into this. Voodoo is what happens when that idea grows up and learns to play every instrument live, in one room at the same time. So what does a perfectionist do after he makes the record of his life, and the world mostly wants to look at him instead of listen to him? He more or less vanishes. D'Angelo was never built for the road to begin with. Across his entire career, he played maybe 200 shows. The Voodoo tour in 2000 became legendary, and then he was basically gone from the stage for over a decade. For 14 years, there was no new album. There were struggles, there was silence, there were a lot of false starts. And then, in December 2014, with almost no warning, he dropped Black Messiah with a band he called The Vanguard. He rushed it out as Ferguson was burning, and it landed as a protest record and a comeback at the same time. It won him another Grammy. It would turn out to be his last album. Even after that, he mostly stayed out of sight. One of the last things he ever recorded was a quiet, aching song called Unshaken, written for the video game Red Dead Redemption 2 in 2018. A cowboy ballad from the man who would not leave the house. Of course it was. He gave the world very little. He just made sure that every bit of it counted. Voodoo, the whole thing, on one card. D'Angelo spent 5 years making Voodoo, and he spent the next 25 protecting what it stood for. Feel over polish, patience over product, keeping the take with the mistake in it because the mistake was alive. When he passed in October 2025, the musicians who came up under him did not lead with the image or the charts or the long silence. They talked about the pocket, the feel, the room. He made an album that sounds like it is leaning back forever, completely sure of itself. That is when it dropped. Next time, we stay in this lineage and go somewhere new. Subscribe so it finds you.